My daughter-in-law called a family meeting, accused me of stealing from her purse, then played a fake video she edited. I stood frozen in the doorway watching Leora tap her laptop with manicured nails, her smile sharp as broken glass, and I knew before she even pressed play that my life was about to shatter into pieces I'd never put back together the same way. The video flickered to life on the screen, and there I was, or at least someone, who looked exactly like me, reaching into her designer purse with trembling hands, and my son Elias leaned forward on the couch, his face transforming from confusion to disgust, so fast it made my stomach drop like a stone down a well. I'm Miles Delacroix, 64 years old, and my greatest flaw has always been that I trust too easily and stay silent too long, swallowing words that should be spoken, because I convince myself that patience is a virtue, when really it's just cowardice dressed up in polite clothing. And I'd been living in my son's house for 8 months now, ever since my husband died, and left me with more memories than money. Letting Leora make little comments about my outdated clothes and simple cooking without ever pushing back, because I told myself family meant bending until you almost break. The room filled with relatives I'd known for years, my sister-in-law Margaret clutching her pearls literally, Elias' best friend Ronan shifting uncomfortably in the corner, and Leora's mother Patricia sitting with her spine straight as a ruler, all of them watching this supposed evidence of my theft play out on a screen that might as well have been an execution platform. I found the money missing again 3 days ago, Leora said, her voice dripping with theatrical sadness that I now recognized as pure performance. $400 this time. I installed a hidden camera because I just couldn't believe it, couldn't accept that someone in this family would steal from me. She paused for effect, letting her words sink into every corner of the living room like poison gas. But there it is, clear as day. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat closed up the way it always does when I'm confronted. That old familiar paralysis that's cost me jobs and friendships, and now apparently my own son's trust. And I hated myself for just sitting there like a statue, while everyone stared at me with eyes full of judgment and pity and disgust. "Mom," Elias' voice cracked on that single word. "Is this real? Did you really do this?" The pain in his face cut deeper than any accusation, and I wanted to reach for him, but my arms felt heavy as concrete. "I can't believe this. After everything we've done for you, giving you a place to stay, making sure you're taken care of." His voice rose higher, anger replacing hurt. "How could you steal from us, from Leora? She's been nothing but kind to you." I didn't, I finally managed to whisper, but my voice came out so weak that I barely heard it myself. "That's not me. I would never." "The video doesn't lie," Leora interrupted, her voice suddenly hard and cold. She crossed her arms over her chest, expensive bracelets jangling. "I know it's difficult to accept, Miles, but we have proof now. Maybe this is some kind of illness, some senior moment situation, but the fact remains that money has been disappearing, and now we know why." "This is insane," I said louder, feeling heat creep up my neck. "I don't know how that video exists, but I never touched your purse, not once, I swear on Robert's grave." "Don't you dare bring Dad into this." Elias stood up fast, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Don't you dare use his memory to cover up your lies." Margaret made a small sound in her throat. "Oh Miles, how could you? We all trusted you." Ronan cleared his throat from the corner. "Maybe we should look at this more carefully. The video quality seems a bit." "The quality is fine," Patricia snapped. "My daughter installed a top-of-the-line security camera. What we're seeing is exactly what happened." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall, my stubborn pride kicking in even as my world collapsed around me, because crying would look like guilt, and I wasn't guilty of anything except being too passive for too long, too willing to accept whatever scraps of dignity people threw my way. But then I noticed something, a tiny detail that anyone else would have missed. The timestamp on the video jumped from 2:17 p.m. to 2:20 p.m. in what should have been a continuous recording. 3 seconds just vanished into nothing, like they never existed at all. My mind started racing, connecting dots I'd been too trusting to see before, remembering how Leora had been pushing for months to have me move to a nursing home, how she'd made comments about the house being too crowded, how she'd mentioned to Elias that his inheritance from Robert should really be invested rather than supporting me. "I need to see that video again," I said, my voice steadier now. "Play it again, slowly." "We've all seen enough," Leora said quickly, reaching for her laptop. "I think the evidence speaks for itself. Elias and I have discussed this, and we believe it's best if you find alternative living arrangements. We'll give you 2 weeks to." "Play it again." Something in my tone must have surprised her, because she actually paused, her hand hovering over the keyboard. "Mom, I don't think watching it again will change anything," Elias said, but he sounded less certain now, maybe hearing something different in my voice than the usual compliant acceptance he'd come to expect. "The facts are right there. "You're in the video. You took the money." "That's not me," I repeated, and this time I stood up, my knees protesting but my resolve hardening like steel. "And I'm going to prove it." Leora's eyes narrowed, just for a fraction of a second, and I saw something flicker across her face that looked almost like fear before her sympathetic mask slipped back into place. She closed her laptop with a decisive click. "I think we're done here. Mile, I'm sorry it came to this, but actions have consequences. Pack your things." "You heard her," Elias said quietly, not meeting my eyes anymore. "I'll help you look for apartments this week." I looked around the room at all these people who'd known me for years, who'd eaten at my table and celebrated birthdays with me, and cried at Robert's funeral while I held them. And now they couldn't even look at me because a 3-minute video had erased decades of trust. Margaret was already gathering her purse to leave, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Patricia wore a satisfied expression that made my skin crawl. Ronan caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod, like he wanted to say something but wouldn't dare contradict the narrative that had been established. And Leora stood there like a queen who'd just pronounced sentence on a convicted criminal, her posture radiating victory. I walked toward the door, my legs feeling shaky but my mind suddenly crystal clear, and as I passed Leora's chair, she leaned in close enough that her perfume made my nose itch and whispered so softly that no one else could possibly hear, "You should have stayed deaf, old woman. This house was never big enough for both of us." My hand went instinctively to my cardigan pocket where I'd been keeping my phone, and I felt the small rectangular shape that I'd almost forgotten about, the voice recorder app that I'd accidentally left running 3 months ago when I'd fallen asleep on the couch during one of my afternoon naps. I'd found it the next day, nearly deleted the file without listening because who wants to hear hours of themselves snoring, but something made me skim through it first, and I'd heard voices, Leora's voice and someone else, maybe her mother or her sister, talking in the kitchen while they thought I was sleeping. I'd saved that recording and then forgotten about it in the chaos of daily life, but now it came rushing back to me with perfect clarity, their conversation about the house and the insurance money, and the plan to get me out of the way. I left without saying another word because speaking would have given away the rage building in my chest, and I've learned over 64 years that silence can be its own kind of weapon when used correctly. I drove to the small apartment I'd been half-heartedly looking at before all this happened, the one-bedroom place across town that cost more than my social security check, but less than my pride, and I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes just breathing and thinking and planning. My flaw has always been that I let people walk over me, but another flaw I've discovered is that once I finally get angry, once that patience snaps like a dry twig, I can be absolutely ruthless in ways that surprise even myself. Robert used to say I had a spine made of iron wrapped in silk. And most people only ever saw the silk, but he knew what was underneath, and sometimes it scared him how cold I could be when someone pushed me too far. I pulled out my phone and called my old friend Celeste, 70 years old and sharp as a tack, who'd been telling me for months that Leora was trouble and I needed to stand up for myself before it was too late. "It's too late," I told her when she answered. "Or maybe it's exactly the right time." What happened? She could hear something in my voice, that new edge that felt foreign and familiar all at once. "Can you come over? I need help with something technical." I explained about the video and the timestamp and the recorder, and she was silent for a long moment before she spoke, her voice careful and measured. "Mile, are you sure about this? Going after family can get messy. Elias is your son." "Elias just chose his wife over his mother without even questioning whether I was telling the truth," I said, and saying it out loud made it real and hurt so much worse than keeping it inside. He didn't even hesitate, so yes, I'm sure. She arrived at my new apartment 2 hours later with her laptop and her grandson Marcus, who was studying digital forensics at the university, and owed her a favor. No, wait, I thought, not Marcus. I'll call him Daniel. Daniel was studying digital forensics, and he looked at me with sympathetic eyes that made me feel ancient and pathetic, until he opened his laptop and got to work, his fingers flying over the keyboard in ways that looked like magic to someone my age who still struggles with smartphone apps. Celeste made coffee in my tiny kitchenette, while Daniel examined the video file that Leora had so helpfully sent to the family group chat as evidence, probably thinking none of us old folks would know how to analyze it properly. "This is edited," Daniel said after 30 minutes, pointing at his screen where he'd pulled up strings of code that meant nothing to me. "See here, the metadata shows multiple saved dates. Someone cut 3 seconds out right in the middle of the recording and spliced in different footage. It's actually pretty amateur work. The lighting doesn't even match correctly if you look at the shadows." "Can you prove it?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. "Can you show it in a way that someone like my son would understand?" I can create a full forensic report with visual comparisons, he said, already typing. It'll take me a few hours, but I can have it ready by tomorrow morning. This will hold up in court if you need it to. I won't need it for court, I said softly. I need it for something much more immediate. Celeste gave me a long look. What are you planning? A family meeting, I said, and I smiled for the first time in days. Just like Leora called, fair is fair. I spent the next 2 days preparing, and this was harder than I'd expected because my natural instinct was still to just let it go, to pack my things quietly and disappear, and let Elias believe whatever he wanted to believe about me. That passive acceptance had been my default setting for so long that choosing confrontation felt like wearing someone else's skin, uncomfortable and strange but necessary. I listened to the recorded conversation from 3 months ago at least 20 times, transcribing every word by hand, because the act of writing it down made it real and undeniable, and what I heard made my blood run cold in ways I hadn't anticipated. Leora and her sister discussing how to frame me, how the security camera would be positioned, how they'd edit the footage to make it convincing, how much money to claim was stolen to make it serious, but not serious enough that police would get involved, and underneath it all the casual cruelty of someone who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. Once she's gone, the house is ours, Leora's voice said on the recording, tinny through my phone speaker but perfectly clear. Elias won't question me if he thinks she's stealing. He already feels guilty about his dad's death, guilty that he wasn't there more. He'll believe anything I tell him about his mother at this point. But what if she fights back? That was her sister's voice, I recognized it now. She won't. Have you met Mile? She's a doormat. She'll cry and pack her bags and leave without causing problems because that's what women like her do. They accept things. Listening to that assessment of my character hurt worse than the false accusation, worse than Elias' disgust, because it was essentially accurate, or at least it had been until about 48 hours ago. I was a doormat. I did accept things. I did let people walk all over me with their dirty shoes, and then I cleaned up after them without complaint. But something had changed in me when Leora whispered her victory in my ear. Something had finally snapped in that place where patience had worn too thin, and now I wanted her to understand that underestimating someone based on their age and their quietness was a mistake that would cost her everything she tried to steal from me. I called Elias on the second day and asked for one final family meeting before I left permanently. I want to say goodbye properly, I told him, making my voice small and defeated, playing into exactly what they expected from me. I know I disappointed you, but you're still my son and I'd like closure. He hesitated. I could hear it in his breathing. Mom, I don't know if that's a good idea. Leora is still really upset about everything. Please, I said, and I let my voice crack just a little. Just 1 hour, then I'll be out of your lives for good. He agreed finally, probably out of guilt that he wasn't quite ready to examine too closely, and we set it for Sunday afternoon, the same time as the last meeting. The same cast of characters gathered to witness my humiliation one more time, except this time the script would be different. I spent Saturday night barely sleeping, running through what I would say and how I would say it, worrying that I'd lose my nerve at the last minute and just accept defeat because that's what felt safe and familiar. My hands shook as I made coffee at 5 in the morning, watching the sun come up over my new apartment complex, and thinking about how I'd lived my whole life trying to avoid conflict and confrontation, and now I was actively seeking it out. Celeste called at 8. Are you ready for this? No, I admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. Good, that's growth. She paused. Do you want me to come with you? No, this is something I need to do alone. I took a breath. Thank you, though, for believing me when no one else did. Mile, honey, I've known you for 30 years. You wouldn't steal a paperclip, let alone $400 from your own family. Anyone who knows you should know that. But they didn't know me, I realized, not really. They knew the version of me I'd carefully constructed over decades, the pleasant, agreeable widow who never made waves, and they'd never bothered to look deeper than that surface. Even Elias, my own son, had accepted Leora's narrative without question because it had never occurred to him that his mother might be anything other than what she appeared to be. That hurt, but it also freed me somehow, released me from the obligation to keep performing that role. I arrived at the house at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying my purse and the folder Daniel had prepared with his forensic analysis and my phone, with the recorded conversation queued up and ready to play. Leora answered the door wearing a sympathetic expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mile, thank you for coming. I know this is hard for you. You have no idea, I said quietly, and I walked past her into the living room where everyone else had already gathered. Elias on the couch looking uncomfortable. Margaret perched on the edge of an armchair. Patricia sitting with her usual rigid posture. Ronan standing by the window. They all looked at me with varying degrees of pity and discomfort, like I was a wounded animal they couldn't quite bring themselves to put down but didn't want to get too close to either. I appreciate everyone coming, I started, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. I wanted to address what happened last week before I leave. Mom, we don't need to rehash everything, Elias said quickly. Maybe it's better to just move forward. No, I think we do need to rehash it, I said firmly, because some things need to be said. Leora sat down next to Elias and reached for his hand. Mile, if you're here to apologize, we appreciate that. We understand this must be some kind of medical issue, and we don't hold it against you personally. I'm not here to apologize. I set my purse on the coffee table. I'm here to show you something. The room got quiet in a way that felt heavy and expectant. I pulled out the folder first, opening it to show the printed screenshots and analysis that Daniel had prepared. This is a forensic examination of the video you showed last week. It proves that the footage was edited. Someone cut out 3 seconds in the middle and spliced in different footage to make it look like I was stealing from your purse. Leora's expression didn't change, but her hand tightened on Elias. That's ridiculous. Why would I edit a video? The camera captured what happened. Because you wanted me out of this house, I said, and my voice stayed calm even though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. You've wanted me gone since the day I moved in, and this was your way of making it happen. This is absurd, Patricia spoke up. My daughter would never do something so underhanded. You're just trying to deflect blame because you got caught. Am I? I pulled out my phone. Then maybe you can explain this. I pressed play on the recording and Leora's voice filled the room, crystal clear and unmistakable, discussing the plan to frame me in detail that left no room for interpretation or excuse. The color drained from her face as her own words convicted her. Once she's gone, the house is ours. Elias won't question me if he thinks she's stealing. Elias stood up slowly, pulling his hand away from Leora's. What is this? When was this recorded? 3 months ago, I said. I fell asleep on the couch and accidentally left my voice recorder running. I heard you talking in the kitchen. The recording continued playing, Leora's casual cruelty echoing off the walls, her sister's participation in the scheme, the cold calculation of how to manipulate my son. She's a doormat. She'll cry and pack her bags and leave without causing problems because that's what women like her do. Turn it off, Leora said suddenly, her voice sharp. That's taken out of context. You don't understand what you heard. I understand perfectly. I stopped the recording, but I didn't put my phone away. You framed me for theft so Elias would kick me out and you could have the house to yourself. Leora, Elias' voice was strange, hollow sounding. Tell me this isn't real. Tell me you didn't do this. She stood up fast, her chair scraping loudly. She's manipulating you. Can't you see that? She probably faked that recording herself. Old people can be very crafty when they want something. The forensic analysis is real, Ronan spoke up from the window, surprising everyone. I had my own doubts about that video last week. The lighting was off, the shadows didn't match, but I didn't say anything because, he stopped looking ashamed, because it was easier not to. Margaret made a small choking sound. Oh my God, Leora, how could you? Why would you do something so cruel? Don't act like you're all innocent, Leora snapped, her composure cracking completely. You all wanted her gone too. You complained about her constantly, about how she was always here, always in the way. I just did what everyone was thinking. That's not true, Elias said, but he sounded uncertain. I never said I wanted Mom gone. I offered her a place to stay. I wanted to take care of her. You felt obligated to take care of her, Leora corrected. There's a difference. You were miserable having her here, but you're too guilty about your dad to admit it, so I solved the problem for you. By framing her as a thief, his voice rose. By humiliating her in front of the entire family, by making everyone think she was stealing from us. It worked, didn't it? Leora crossed her arms, until she decided to play detective instead of just accepting reality. The room exploded into overlapping voices, everyone talking at once, but I just stood there quietly watching everything unfold, feeling strangely detached from the chaos I'd created. Patricia was defending her daughter shrilly, insisting this was all a misunderstanding. Margaret was crying and apologizing to me. Ronan was shaking his head in disgust, and Elias just stared at his wife like he'd never seen her before, like she'd transformed into a stranger right in front of him. How long has this been going on? He asked finally, cutting through the noise. How long have you been planning this? Since she moved in, Leora said flatly, apparently done with pretending. Since the day you announced your mother would be living with us, and I realized I'd never have my own house, my own space, my own life because you'd always put her first. She's my mother, my father just died. What was I supposed to do? Put your wife first for once, Leora's voice cracked. Choose me instead of choosing her every single time. But you can't do that, can you? You'll always be Mama's boy, always running back to Mile when things get tough instead of building a life with me. So you decided to destroy her reputation, Elias was shouting now, to make our entire family think she was a criminal. That was your solution. I did what I had to do to protect our marriage, she shot back. And if you can't see that, then maybe we don't have a marriage worth protecting. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia stood up suddenly. Come on, Leora, we're leaving. I'm not going anywhere, Leora said. This is my house too. Actually, Elias said quietly, dangerously, it's not. The house is in my name only. You insisted on keeping your apartment as an investment property when we got married, remember? So technically this is my house. Her face went white. You wouldn't. Get out. His voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. Pack whatever you need for tonight and get out. We'll figure out the rest later. You're choosing her over me. Leora looked genuinely shocked, like this outcome had never occurred to her. After everything I've done for you. You framed my mother as a thief, he said, each word carefully enunciated. What exactly have you done for me besides lie and manipulate and try to tear my family apart? She grabbed her purse and her laptop, her hands shaking with rage or fear or both. At the doorway she turned back. You'll regret this, both of you. Then she was gone, Patricia trailing behind her, both of them leaving like escaping criminals. The room stayed quiet for a long time after they left. Margaret eventually excused herself, mumbling more apologies. Ronan squeezed my shoulder as he walked out. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. It's okay, I told him, and I meant it. I understand why you didn't. Then it was just me and Elias, standing in the living room that had been the site of my public humiliation and now my vindication, and I didn't know what to say to him anymore. He looked older somehow, tired and sad and angry all at once, and I wanted to comfort him the way I had when he was young, but I didn't know if I had that right anymore after everything that had happened. Mom, he started, then stopped. I don't even know where to begin. I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have questioned that video. I should have. You should have trusted me, I said gently, but you didn't, and that tells me something about our relationship that I need to think about. What does it tell you? He sounded afraid of the answer. That maybe I've been so eager to avoid being a burden that I made myself invisible, I said slowly, working through thoughts I'd been having for days. That maybe by always being agreeable and never causing problems, I taught you that I wasn't worth defending, that my feelings and my truth didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. That's not true. I love you. I know you do, but love and trust aren't always the same thing. I picked up my purse. I'm going to go now. Wait, you don't have to leave. This is still your home. I want you to stay. I shook my head. I already signed a lease on an apartment. I think some distance is good right now for both of us. Please don't go, his voice cracked. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We are family. We are family, I agreed, and families survive distance, but right now I need space to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be convenient for everyone else. I could see him wanting to argue, to convince me to stay, but something in my expression stopped him. Maybe he finally understood that this wasn't just about Leora's betrayal, but about something deeper, something that had been building for years underneath my pleasant exterior. I'd spent so long being the peacekeeper that I'd forgotten how to stand my ground, and now that I'd finally found my footing, I wasn't ready to give it up just to make things easier. I'll call you, I said at the door. We'll have dinner sometime next week, but I need you to understand that things are different now. Different how? I'm different, I said simply, and I'm still figuring out what that means. I drove back to my apartment through streets that felt strange and familiar all at once, past the grocery store where I'd shopped for 50 years and the park where I'd taken Elias as a child, and I thought about Leora and how badly she'd miscalculated, how she'd seen my quietness as weakness and my patience as surrender, without understanding that underneath all that silk wrapping was indeed iron, and that iron had just woken up after decades of rust. Over the following weeks, the consequences of that family meeting rippled outward in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Elias filed for divorce within days, citing irreconcilable differences, and providing the forensic analysis and recording as evidence of Leora's deception, and she fought back hard, hiring an expensive lawyer and trying to claim the recording was illegally obtained, but the truth was too clear and too damning. Patricia stopped speaking to me entirely, which honestly felt like a relief, and Margaret called me weekly to apologize again and tell me how brave I'd been, though I didn't feel particularly brave, just tired and sad and strangely empty. The divorce took 3 months, and Leora ended up with very little beyond her apartment and some shared savings, because California law doesn't look kindly on fraud even in marriage dissolution, and I heard through the family grapevine that she'd moved back east somewhere to start over where people didn't know what she'd done. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and pity when I heard that. Satisfaction that she'd faced real consequences for trying to destroy me. Pity because I understood better than most what it felt like to have your life implode and have to rebuild from nothing. Elias called me every few days at first, then every week, then less frequently as we both settled into our new normal. He asked me to move back in after the divorce was final, and I said no as gently as I could, explaining again that I needed this independence, this distance, this chance to be someone other than his mother for a while. He didn't really understand, but he accepted it, and slowly we started building a different kind of relationship, one based less on obligation and more on genuine choice. The strangest consequence of everything was what happened to me internally, how that moment of standing up for myself had fundamentally changed something in my personality that I'd thought was fixed and unchangeable after 64 years. I found myself speaking up more, saying no to things I didn't want to do, expressing opinions I would have previously kept to myself, and sometimes it felt uncomfortable and wrong, like wearing shoes on the wrong feet, but other times it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. Celeste said I was finally coming into myself, becoming the person I should have been all along, and maybe she was right, though it felt less like becoming and more like remembering, like I'd been someone strong and certain once, and had somehow forgotten over the decades of marriage and motherhood and widowhood. I still sometimes listen to that recording late at night, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder of what happens when you underestimate people, when you assume that quiet means weak and patient means defeated. Leora had looked at me and seen a doormat, someone who would accept whatever treatment was handed out without fighting back, and she'd been right about me for most of my life, but she'd missed the crucial detail that even doormats can be removed and replaced with something stronger, something that won't absorb quite so much dirt. On a Tuesday afternoon 6 months after that final family meeting, I was sitting in my small apartment reading a book when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up, and Leora's voice came through the speaker, hesitant and strange. "Mile, it's Leora, don't hang up please." I stayed silent, waiting to see what she wanted. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she continued when I didn't respond. "For everything, for the video, for the lies, for trying to destroy you. I was wrong, and I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it." "Why now?" I asked finally. "Why are you calling me 6 months later to apologize?" "Because my therapist said I needed to make amends." She laughed bitterly. "And because I finally understand what I did to you, how much it must have hurt to have your own son turn against you because of my lies." "It did hurt," I said simply, "more than you could possibly imagine." "I was jealous," she admitted, "of your relationship with Elias, of how much he loved you, of how you were always going to be more important to him than I was, and instead of dealing with that like an adult, I tried to eliminate the competition." "I was never your competition, I was his mother." "I know that now, but at the time all I could see was that he put your needs before mine and I couldn't handle it." She paused. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and that I'm trying to be better." I thought about forgiveness, about whether I had any to offer this woman who'd tried to systematically destroy my life and my relationship with my son, and I realized I didn't know the answer. "Maybe someday, but not today, not yet, possibly not ever." "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully, "but I'm not ready to forgive you. I might never be ready." "I understand," she sounded like she was crying. "Take care of yourself, Mile." She hung up and I sat there holding my phone, thinking about karma and consequences, and how the revenge I'd planned and executed had been necessary and justified, but had also changed everyone involved in ways both obvious and subtle. Leora had lost her marriage and her reputation. Elias had lost his wife and his innocence about his mother. Patricia had lost her relationship with her son-in-law. Margaret had lost her certainty about family loyalty. Ronan had lost his comfort of staying silent. And I had lost my patience, my willingness to accept mistreatment, my carefully constructed role as the agreeable widow who never made waves. But I'd also gained something in that loss, gained a voice and a backbone and a sense of self that I hadn't realized was missing until I found it. And as I sat in my apartment watching the sun set over the city I'd lived in my entire life, I thought about Robert and what he would have said about all this. He would have been proud, I decided, proud that I'd finally stood up for myself, even if it took his death and a manipulative daughter-in-law and a doctored video to make it happen. He'd always known there was iron underneath the silk, and now everyone else knew it too. The phone rang again, Elia's this time, and I answered with a smile. "Hey honey, what's up?" "Just wanted to see if you're free for dinner Thursday," he said. "There's this new restaurant downtown I thought we could try." "I'd love that," I said, and I meant it. "Should I meet you there or do you want to pick me up?" "I'll pick you up, 7, okay?" "Perfect." We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, the weather and his work and a movie he'd seen, and it felt normal and comfortable in a way our conversations hadn't felt in years, maybe because we were finally building something real instead of maintaining something obligatory. When we hung up, I realized I was genuinely looking forward to Thursday, looking forward to seeing my son and having dinner and talking about our separate lives, and that felt like its own kind of revenge against Leora's attempt to tear us apart permanently, the fact that we'd survived her manipulation and come out different but not broken, changed but not destroyed. Sunset painted my apartment walls gold and orange, and I thought about endings and beginnings, and how sometimes they're the same thing viewed from different angles. How my old life ended in that living room when Leora pressed play on a fake video, but my new life also began there when I decided I wouldn't accept defeat without fighting back. And I wasn't sure yet if I liked this new version of myself better than the old one, but I knew I respected her more, and maybe that was enough for now. Maybe respect was a better foundation than likability anyway. I'd spent 64 years trying to be liked, trying to be convenient and agreeable and unobtrusive, and where had it gotten me except framed for theft by my own daughter-in-law? So perhaps it was time to try something different, time to be the kind of woman who stood her ground and spoke her truth, even when it made other people uncomfortable, even when it disrupted the peace I'd worked so hard to maintain. The apartment felt small but mine, empty but full of possibility, and I realized this was the first place I'd lived alone since Robert died. The first space that was entirely my own without obligations or expectations or anyone else's needs to consider, and that felt both terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I could eat cereal for dinner if I wanted. I could stay up until 3 in the morning reading. I could leave dishes in the sink overnight. I could be exactly who I was without performing for anyone, without smoothing over conflicts or accepting mistreatment or swallowing words that needed to be spoken. Celeste called at 8 to check in. She did that most evenings now, and I told her about Leora's call and Elias' dinner invitation and how I was feeling about everything. And she listened the way she always did, asking questions when I needed prompting and staying quiet when I needed to think. And I wondered what I would have done without her friendship through all of this, whether I would have had the courage to fight back without her encouragement, and I made a mental note to tell her that sometime soon. To express gratitude for the things people do that seem small, but turn out to be life-changing. As I got ready for bed that night, washing my face and brushing my teeth and changing into comfortable pajamas, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Same grey hair, same wrinkles around the eyes, same age spots on my hands, but something in the expression was different, something harder and softer simultaneously, like I'd lost vulnerability but gained strength, or maybe I'd always had both and was just now letting them show on my face instead of hiding behind pleasant masks. This was who I was now, someone who'd been pushed too far and pushed back harder, someone who'd been underestimated and proved everyone wrong, someone who'd been called a doormat and decided to become a steel door instead. And as I lay in bed waiting for sleep, thinking about family meetings and fake videos and recorded confessions, and the look on Leora's face when her own words convicted her, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, maybe decades, maybe ever, and it took me a moment to identify the emotion because it was so unfamiliar. It was pride. Simple, uncomplicated pride in myself for standing up when it would have been easier to stay down, for fighting when it would have been safer to surrender, for choosing my own dignity over everyone else's comfort. I'd won, not just against Leora, but against the version of myself who would have accepted defeat without question, and that victory felt bigger and more important than any revenge could ever be. The consequences were still rippling outward, still reshaping relationships and futures in ways I couldn't predict, but I'd learned something crucial about myself in the process. Learned that patience can turn to strength when pushed far enough, that silk can hide iron until the moment it's needed most, and that the worst mistake someone can make is assuming that quiet people have nothing to say.